Hey everybody, Mike Schumann and Seth Tow of the Daily Hoosier here for another episode of the East 17th Street podcast. And Seth, the Indiana football Hoosiers are the 2025 outright undisputed Big Ten champions. How does that sound? For me, it sounds hard to process, still hard to imagine. How does it sound to you? I'm not asking you that. It probably sounds like I'm asking that from a fan perspective. I'm asking you like as an observer of college football. How does that sound?
I mean, it's the type of thing where if you told me that the day that Cignetti was hired, my jaw would drop. But after watching them this season, I mean, it's hard to say that it's anything other than deserved. I mean, look, we talked last week and one of us picked Indiana to win and one of us didn't. And so
I don't recall that part of the conversation.
So it's hard to say it's anything other than deserved. I mean, look, they're the only 13-0 team left in FBS, and I mean, they had to slay like I wrote in the story right at the buzzer. I mean, they slayed the proverbial final boss to do it, beating Ohio State. And I mean, for everything that you could say about Indiana's schedule in 2024 and people that are continuing to rightly or wrongly knock the non-conference schedule this year, I mean, the wins that they've accumulated between Oregon, Iowa, Ohio State, yes, Penn State has fallen off, but obviously still a bowl eligible team and winning at Penn State. The wins that this team has accumulated along the way, I mean, it's hard to say that this is anything other than deserved.
Yeah. One thing that I feel like kind of got lost in all the insanity of Saturday night is the first win over Ohio State since 1988. That had been going on since I was in high school. And I think you also said last podcast that I looked old. So everybody knows that was a long time ago. So yeah, first win over them since 1988, first outright Big Ten title since 1945. And no, I was not alive then. I will give you a ton of credit because I don't know that you picked a score, but I said Ohio State by 3, and I think you said that's directionally the margin, but you're going to go with IU. So you pretty much nailed it.
Yeah. I mean, I went a little higher scoring, I think, when I gave the score, but I mean, I never have any mathematical science behind picking those scores, and I mean, it played out the way it played out. But yeah, I mean, my reasoning for picking Indiana, I think played out like I said last week. I mean, I just felt like this team had seen it all throughout the season, and they were so battle tested, and I just had the trust that, this team could find itself down 10-0, 10-3, second quarter, and that they just wouldn't panic and they would know how to get themselves back in the game. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. And I'll give myself some credit too, because I think another thing we talked about last week that I mentioned is thinking back to the 2024 game. Like, I really felt like there were a lot of variables that if you could kind of pull them out of the equation, the fact that last year's game was played at Ohio State, last year's game, Curtis Rourke wasn't mobile, and most of the difference in the game was kind of flukish special team stuff. And I thought if you could take that stuff out and just have these two teams line up and play a clean game, which by and large they did, then I thought it would be, a very close game. So I think that's what we saw play out in this game. Both teams missed a field goal. Both teams had an interception. So that kind of washed itself out. And otherwise it was just kind of mano a mano at the line of scrimmage, very tough physical game where yards were hard to come by. Where, as you said, Indiana got down, but you could almost sense like that they weren't panicked, that they just needed that one drive, and they got it in the third quarter when Fernando Mendoza found Elijah Surratt in the corner of the end zone for the feels like the signature play for Indiana's offense, the back shoulder in the end zone. They've had so many of those. It's a staple of the offense. And Fernando, in so doing, with so many key throws in that game, seems as though he's also locked up the Heisman. But before we get into that, just kind of what were your big picture takeaways from the game? I feel like as Isaiah Jones said after the game, it was the final nail in the coffin for the doubters. It was the I walked away from it with the sense that these guys can compete with anybody. Like this CFP bracket is tough. There's probably going to be a lot of games like this, like Penn State, Iowa, Oregon, but Indiana's going to be right there, if not favored in every game, right there as it with a chance to win every game in a tough physical battle from here on out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this team is just able to win games in so many different ways. I mean, we saw them. I mean, it wasn't what this. I mean, the physicality of the game and the tight knit type of game was the same. But I mean, they had to put up 30 points to win it against Oregon, and this is a team that we know their offense when they get rolling. I mean, this is a team that's capable of kind of hanging in terms of a shootout if it turned into that kind of game. But this is also a team that can win this kind of low scoring, physical, defensive struggle, defensive battle, whatever you want to call it. I mean, they've got Indiana and Ohio State both finished with one turnover apiece, but Indiana largely was winning the line of scrimmage in this game up front. I mean, I thought the defensive line was dominant for a lot of the game. I mean, Indiana racked up 9 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. I mean, Julian, I pointed that out going into the matchup, last week, that Ohio State's pass protection wasn't bad, but that was going to be, if Indiana was going to win this game or give themselves a chance in this game, that's the area they needed to exploit and getting consistent pressure on Julian Sayin, and they did a great job of that. And I mean, Sayin had the numbers look strong. Granted, I'll point out that he had 258 passing yards, a touchdown and a pick in the end. 46 of those yards were on the desperate heave at the very end of the game that didn't really amount to anything. So, whatever you want to take from that. I mean, Sayin wasn't bad in this game, but I mean, as far as and that's a good transition to the Heisman conversation as well. And just kind of a takeaway I'd had from Sayin even going into this game, that and nothing that he did changed the opinion. Nothing he did on Saturday changed the opinion that I had of him going into that game, which was, I mean, Sayin's numbers have been tremendous this season, really. And in some categories, they're stronger than Fernando Mendoza's numbers, but not all numbers are created equally. And you watch Ohio State throughout the season, and there's just very few moments, if any, where you watch that offense and you feel like, okay, Julian Sayin is the one driving the bus here. With the group of receivers he has, with the running game they have, just the overall collection of talent that they have, you never really felt like it was Julian Sayin, leading this team and proving, that he's the most valuable player in college football, the best player in college football, whatever you want to call it. And we've seen that plenty of times from Fernando this season. And I mean, that happened again in the Big Ten championship game. As far as the big picture takeaways, yeah, I mean, you're right that this team, like I said, this team can win so many different types of ways. I don't know that there's any team. I mean, there obviously, as you get deeper into the CFP tournament, I mean, you're going to face good teams because you're just, the final 8, the final 4, the national championship game. You face good teams when you get deep into that tournament. And that's not to say that Indiana couldn't lose to some of those teams. But I mean, I don't think there's any team that I would see on paper at this point go up against Indiana. And I'm not saying Indiana would be favored in every single game, but there's no team that I would say, Indiana has no chance of beating that team. That's the big picture takeaway, as far as the CFP. But I mean, the really big picture takeaway, I mean, it has to be separate from the CFP. And it's just, I mean, look at the picture that we have up in this podcast with Curt Cignetti holding up the trophy, the confetti raining down on Indiana football. And it's like, how did we get here to where Indiana football is able to do that? I mean, it was less than 2 years ago that, Cignetti was just, it was 2 years ago that Cignetti was just hired after another disappointing season. It felt like Indiana had wasted they had the 2 good years under Tom Allen, and it felt like they just gave all of that program momentum right back. And that this was a program that was just never going to be able to get out of its own way if it ever got close, even close to something like this. And now here they are, they're 13-0. They just beat Ohio State to win the Big Ten championship. And I think fans should savor this, that win Saturday night, the Big Ten championship, no matter what happens in the college football playoff.
Yeah, every time I look at this picture, and by the way, credit to Owen Graham, a great photo for the Daily Hoosier. He took a ton of good shots for us on the field Saturday night. But I almost have to like focus in on Signetti's shirt there and say, oh yeah, that's Indiana. That's actually an IU logo in that kind of moment. Because I mean, for my entire lifetime, the hope was get to 6 wins, and you don't even have to do that every year. Like get to 6 wins occasionally, just give us a little taste of success, and that was good enough. And now it's just the standard is unimaginable what's been set here. And to your point, like don't my reminder to everybody is like don't get so caught up in this that you don't appreciate what has already happened here. And because these CFP games are going to be incredibly tight, at least we expect them to be. Don't, whatever happens, good or bad, just don't allow yourself to forget how bad it's been. They just got off the schneid as the losingest team in the history of college football this season. And just enjoy that picture, burn it into your brain, and just hope in this crazy world of college football that they can sustain it. I mean, everything points to the fact that they can sustain it, but you just never know. Um, of
Yeah,
course,
and
when things
it's
like that, go ahead.
and I mean, even in the big picture within Indiana, I mean, Indiana football winning a Big Ten championship is one of the greatest accomplishments by any Indiana team in the last 25 years, you'd have to say. I mean, up there probably with women's basketball winning the Big Ten in 2023. And I mean, men's soccer won all those the national titles, the 2000s. They had the one in, I think, 2012. But I mean, for Indiana football to win a Big Ten championship is right up there with anything that IU athletics has produced in the last 25 years, at least.
Yeah, for sure. And especially, I think I mentioned this last week, in light of the fact that the Big Ten added Oregon, Washington, USC. It just made the mountain ostensibly that much steeper to climb, but they've done it. Um, they're number one overall in the polls, the CFP. They're Big Ten champions, and when that kind of stuff happens, everybody naturally looks at the quarterback, they look at the head coach. But I want to talk for a second at least about Bryant Haynes in this defense, because that was the story to me on Saturday night. The defense was dominant. They were dominant out at Oregon as well. He's already gotten some recognition early this week as a national assistant coach of the year. He's on the finalist for the Broyles Award, which is the most prominent national assistant coach of the year honor. I mean, if you rewind the tape on this podcast, I said back in August when we were talking position groups that I was a little concerned about this defense. They were going to start a true sophomore in Elijah Hardy, and I wasn't too sure if he was ready for that role. Jamari Sharp, who I think we can say with Jamari, like we didn't really, I don't ever remember thinking about Jamari Sharp on Saturday night. And that's a good thing if you're a cornerback generally, unless we're talking interceptions or something like that. But going up against Ohio State's elite wide receivers, there were no issues there. And there were a few other things that I was concerned about. They navigated that whole Lewis Moore situation, which was a little funky through the first half of the season. Um, Brian Haynes he deserves all of the National Assistant Coach of the Year honors. Like I can't imagine a better job than what he's done this year.
Absolutely. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves in a lot of ways, which I'm pulling up right now. But I mean, Indiana was sixth in the country in total defense, 257 yards per game. I mean, the way that he just consistently dialed up the pressure on opposing quarterbacks, all the stunts and twists and everything they used. They finished tied for, I mean, I guess the season's still going and, we'll see where they actually finish. But as of now, they're tied for fourth in the country in total sacks as a team, 39th. I mean, that's, again, we're talking about Indiana football, second in the country in tackles for loss. I mean, and to be clear, the position coaches deserve a lot of praise as well. Pat Kuntz, Buda Williams up front.
Mm-hmm.
I think Haynes himself deals with the linebackers. Indiana's linebackers have been outstanding this season. You're right
Yes.
that there were a few. I mean, I think you were probably a little more concerned about it than I was, the linebackers going into the season. But I mean, that's not to say that it wasn't at least a bit of a question mark as to how Elijah
Right.
Hardy would handle that. And I mean, certainly we didn't project Isaiah Jones to become the player that he's become. I mean, Isaiah Jones could end up being. I mean, you want to look around this defense and how many guys could end up being All Americans around this defense. I mean, obviously, there's all these different publications that are going to put that
Right.
out, and I mean, you can question worthiness and whatnot, but I mean, if you want to talk potential All Americans, I mean, Tyreek Tucker could reasonably be an All American. I mean, I'm not sure that Stephen Daly is going to get there just because he wasn't starting for half the season, but the numbers, he was leading the country in tackles for loss. I think he finished with 19 after the Ohio State game. And obviously, we're going to talk about him a little more later, but Stephen Daly, could get some sort of recognition like that. Aiden Fisher could be an All-American, should be an All-American. Isaiah Jones, I'd put up there. Lewis Moore, who you mentioned, has had an All-American caliber season. D'Angelo Pons, you could make that case for. I mean, you're looking at potentially, 4, 5, 6 guys getting All-American recognition just on the defense. And I mean, I think for so long when we've asked, Cignetti or defensive players just about Brian Haynes' system and what these guys like about working with it and playing in it. And I feel like the most common answer that comes up is that he puts his guys in position to make plays and he puts his guys in position to succeed. They're really good at identifying the weakness of the opponent and just pouncing on it. And you're right. I mean, he's racking up the recognition and it's absolutely deserved. I mean, frankly, I mean, Indiana is going to be very lucky if they keep him around after this season. I mean, we're late in the head coaching carousel cycle at this point. The Michigan job just opened up, but we're late in the cycle, and Haynes is, he could have taken an interview that we haven't heard about at some point, but as of now, I mean, he's still on IU staff, and I think Indiana would be very fortunate if they keep him around for another season.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the reason why Cignetti was so aggressive in getting Haynes and offensive coordinator Mike Shanahan massive raises is, to help avoid a situation where like a James Madison or other schools like that will try to come in and steal those guys. I think Haynes is making right around 2 million and Shanahan around 1.5, and most of the G5 schools don't pay their head coaches that much, so they'd have to contemplate a pay cut. I did kind of, when I saw the Michigan opening, kind of lose my breath a little bit. I know Haynes is an Ohio guy, so I don't know if he grew up with a hatred for the blue M, but
well, I lost my breath a little bit for a lot of reasons with that story.
well, yeah, I guess I'm kind of skipping over the headline, aren't I? But the guys you mentioned, Tyreek Tucker, Jamari Sharp, Elijah Hardy, Isaiah Jones, the thing they all have in common, and I'm probably skipping others, but they were not starters last year. Like, we in this era, you think of teams playing at this level, number one in the country, being heavy in the portal, which Indiana has been. There's no doubt about it. But this really speaks to the developmental side of what's going on right now. Tucker didn't start last year, although he kind of emerged late in the year. Jamari Sharp didn't start last year. Hardy was a guy that I don't even think he had any other Power 4 offers out of high school, and played some last year but didn't start as a freshman. And Isaiah Jones didn't start last year. So these are all guys that have developed incredibly over the last year. And it's kind of what modern college football is. You got to have the developmental piece, you got to have the portal piece, and you got to have the staff that can bring it all together.
Yeah, and I mean, Indiana, at least a lot. It's a question every year as you reset the roster and have to go back into the portal and just reconfigure everything. If that, whether that's going to last from one year to the next. But I mean, the last 2 years, Indiana's had all three of those things.
And it's probably, I hadn't thought of this till right now, but it's pretty critical that Indiana got that bye, just the way the portal calendar is now. It's open the first 2 weeks of January, but all the work's going to be done right now, identifying, all the back channel conversations are happening now. You're going to see guys commit out of the portal the day it opens, which is going to be funny, but it's just the way the NCAA set it up. But having 3.5 weeks off really allows the staff to kind of catch their breath and start thinking about next year, as weird as that sounds with everything that's ahead of them for January. But I think it's pretty critical because Signetti and his staff have proven that their player evaluation is top notch, and they've got some time to get that done right now.
Yeah, yes and no, I'd say, because you look at last year when they didn't have a bye, they had to play in the first round of the CFP last year. And keep in mind, last year was the old calendar where the transfer portal opened right away after the season, and so they were having to balance literally the portal being open. I think they held some like portal recruiting visits, like not the week, not game week, but the this week that we're in right now, kind of the week before the first round of
Hmm.
the CFP. They held portal visits this week. They
You're
were
right.
having to really juggle, doing that all last year. And I mean, look at the results of it from last year with the way that they were able to recruit the portal last offseason. So I don't know that it's something that they necessarily need, but it's, I mean, certainly not a bad thing to be able to take a little extra time and focus on that.
Yeah, and I do specifically remember Riley Nowakowski saying that he came in for a visit as IU was preparing for Notre Dame last year, and that's something that stood out to him as just like how focused and dialed in that late in the season everybody was, and that helped him decide to come to Indiana. So no doubt that's true, but I do think it helps at least on the margin. So you look at that photo there, Indiana celebrating on the field, and little did we know as that was happening, uh, the man on the screen there, starting edge rusher Stephen Daly, got injured during that celebration. You know, you're gonna have to help me here because my mind starts to wander back to like Indiana football. Here we go again. Like, how long do you get to enjoy something like this? I don't know exactly from the final second ticking off the clock to him being injured was, but I bet it was less than 5 minutes. As he ventured over to the end zone and high five, probably his family or friends over there. Just a really unfortunate situation. I'll say first and foremost for him, because I really feel like, and it's not over for him, but I really feel like he was a guy that was going to just fire right up the draft boards this spring, because of the amazing back half of the season that he had.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess depending on the severity of the injury and just how much teams are able to view him and see him and how much they believe in him, he still could get picked. But I mean, the odds of him rising up the boards, as you say, are
Yeah,
probably slim at this point. And it's just such a shame. I mean, on a personal level, I mean, because like you said, he had such a great back half of the year after Kellen Wyatt got hurt. He did such a great job of stepping in, and he was having a nice season, in a reserve role even before then. I think when Kellen Wyatt got hurt during the Michigan State game. So when Stephen Daly took over as the starter there, he had already had 2, 4, 6, 7. He'd already had 7.5 tackles for loss at that point, when he took over.
right,
And it's like, that was a great spot for Indiana to be in if you're going to lose a starter in Kellen Wyatt, to have
right.
somebody be able to step in who was already producing at that level. And he really turned it up a notch from there. I mean, he actually didn't even post, and he posted a half TFL against UCLA and none against Maryland. But then 2.5 at Penn State, 3 against Wisconsin, 4.5 against Purdue, and 1 against Ohio State. And he only finished with what I think 5.5 sacks. I think so. I mean, it really goes to show. I mean, he was a lot of that came in the run game, which I
Yeah,
mean, when you talk about edge rusher so often, it's so much, the discussion is so often just about how they are as pass rushers and how they are getting home to the quarterback. And I mean, to finish with 19 TFLs and with only 5.5 of them being sacks, I mean, it shows that he was doing a really good job in the run game. And that's something that Indiana will miss, not having him through the college football playoff, which Curt Cignetti said on the Zoom call with us yesterday that it's probably going to keep him out for the rest of the season. So, yeah, they're going to have to. I mean, Brian Haynes, Kurt Signetti, all the defensive staff, they're going to have to figure some stuff out.
Yeah, PFF says he's the top rated run defender on the team amongst the defensive linemen. So, just further to your point on that, what's most two things are troubling about it. One, as you mentioned, he is the replacement of a replacement, or not of a replacement, but he was technically Kellen Wyatt's replacement. Although they were rotating, Daly played all year. His role just expanded as Wyatt went down. And I remember thinking at the time, Wyatt's a big loss, but if you were going to lose a starter, that's not the worst one to lose because Daly has looked really good, and that turned out to be the case. The other thing that's concerning though is that like this is a defense almost entirely predicated on, playing vertical, getting into the backfield, getting TFLs, getting sacks, and as you just alluded to with those stats, nobody on this team was better the back third of the season and getting that done. Um, and it's a question of where you turn. I think the person you'll logically point to is Daniel Ndukwe, who's a sophomore. And the good thing about him is he has played each of the last 2 years. He didn't redshirt last year as a true freshman, and he is now in the end of his sophomore year. So he ought to be pretty close to fully physically developed and, has experience, knows the scheme, knows the system. So it's not the worst case scenario, but, I think Daly's that's a major, major loss in my mind. It probably, I mentioned, a good reason to have some time off. It's going to be a good reason to figure out how to adjust to this because I think it is a major adjustment coming for the staff to figure this out.
Absolutely. I mean, Daniel Dukwe is, logically, I guess, the next man up. But I mean, he's been out there on special teams and he'd seen some defensive snaps through the later half of the season. Just, I guess, spelling Daly at times, Mikal Kamara at times. And, Ndukwe, I like Ndukwe. I think he's a guy that, when you start talking about next year and, okay, he's in that group, when you talk about like Kobe Martin on offense of guy, and I mean,
Right.
certainly Charlie Becker at this point too, of guys, underclassmen on this roster that I'd say, okay, these guys are going to be good for Indiana next year. I would put Ndukwe in that group. He's obviously less proven than Kobe Martin and Charlie Becker, certainly, but I mean, I think he's a good player. It's just a big spot to throw him into, number one. I mean, and number two is, I guess, the other potential way around this is if they are comfortable putting Mario Landino back out on the edge a little bit more, which, I mean, he's been playing inside pretty much all season at this point. And I mean, if you put him out on the edge a little bit more, which he's capable of, I believe, and then
Mm-hmm.
you see a little more Hosea Wheeler inside, you see a little more Dominique Ratcliffe inside, and I mean, Indiana, I mean, that might be the better way in terms of getting your most talent on the field defensively is if you put Mario Landino out wide and then you had Wheeler inside. But I mean, the question is, are you as Mario Landino has played really well this season at defensive tackle, are you comfortable displacing him and putting him into a spot that he hasn't really played this season by doing?
I fully agree. Landino could pop out, but it is tough to take a guy away from something he's excelling at. But he does have it. He has played snaps this year and last year outside. The other guys, at least worth mentioning, you never know like what coaches are thinking about players behind the scenes, even if they haven't played snaps. Andrew DePape, Michigan State transfer, and his brother are both at that position. Andrew Turvey as well. So there's people there, but it's going to be a real challenge. I think Stephen Daly, I just can't overstate like how good he was over the back third of the season. So obviously not the best news for Indiana in that regard, but no reason to doubt that the staff will come up with solutions there. What is good news for Indiana is that as part of winning the Big Ten championship game, as part of being the number one team in the country and being 13-0, it looks like, and I will caveat, it looks like Heisman Mendoza is going to come to fruition on Saturday night. Fernando Mendoza was invited to the Heisman ceremony in New York Saturday evening. He is, I believe, the odds-on favorite. You know, but I will say again, I'll show my age a little bit. The last time Indiana had a legitimate Heisman contender, I was also in high school. It was the year after that last win over Ohio State, 1989. Anthony Thompson was the runner-up, and I think most Indiana fans going into that evening in 1989 thought Thompson would win it. And it was a little bit of a role reversal because Indiana, from a record standpoint that year, wasn't the greatest, and that may have played a role. This year, I think the fact that Indiana's 13-0 gives Mendoza the significant edge. In 1989, Anthony Thompson finished second in the voting to Houston's Andre Ware. And why I bring that up, other than just the relevant history, is that I think it's important to keep in mind this is a national vote, and a lot of times you'll see, even today, it's historically always been this way, and it continues on, that there's regional bias in this stuff. There's the West Coast guys will have their West Coast favorite. The South will go with their SEC favorite, or whatever the case may be. And so I would say that while I'm like 95% confident Mendoza's going to win this thing, you just never know. And I can't escape on a daily basis. I can't escape the effort to try to prop up Diego Pavia. So I do wonder how close this thing's going to be, as I guess what I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, Mendoza is, I mean, when you look at the sports books, the betting favorite. He's, depending, the odds on that have actually moved a little bit, moved it a little bit down. I mean, he was, I think, right after the Big Ten title game, I think he moved to like minus 3,000, like a very, very heavy favorite. He's now at about minus 1,500, minus 1,000, which, I mean, look, that's still a very heavy favorite, and the ballots have all been submitted. So I guess I don't even know what is changing as far as the odds on that stuff. And certainly, I mean, the books, I mean, they keep a pretty tight lid on all of that stuff. I mean, when you mention the regionality of it all, I mean, you have two players from the state of Indiana that are finalists in Fernando Mendoza and Jeremiah Love, and the third finalist out of the four is Ohio State's quarterback Julian Sayin. So you have three kind of right, in the middle of each other there, Midwest guys there. And then you have Pavia, who, I mean, he is going to be kind of that SEC representative, and he is the likely to probably carry the Southern vote if that's kind of the way you're looking at it. But he's not even playing at I also wonder, is the traditional SEC Southern voter kind of considering, does it weigh on them that it's somebody from Vanderbilt and not one of your traditional SEC powers, right, like LSU, or, I mean, even Oklahoma, like, Big 12 type team, old Big 12 type of team that's won a lot of Heisman trophies. It's a very interesting Heisman field, but I mean, Mendoza does seem like he's going to lift the trophy on Saturday. I mean, look, we'll see what ultimately happens and how close the margin is and all of that. I wouldn't expect him to be unanimous by any stretch of the imagination. I wouldn't expect that this is going to be the closest Heisman race in history, but somewhere in between.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought about the Vanderbilt aspect of it. That's an interesting point. I could almost see some people that maybe favor the traditional powers kind of snubbing Pavia because he's a from a peasant school. But we'll see. I was looking at snap counts. Fernando has more total snaps because the reason I'm pointing this out, a lot of people will say, well, look at Pavia's raw numbers. He's produced more yards, even though Mendoza leads the country in passing touchdowns. Mendoza's played more snaps, but that's almost entirely because of the conference championship game. Pavia's actually played a total of 48 more passing snaps than Mendoza. So I think that probably explains most of the difference. Mendoza just was in so many games where the second half, they were basically just trying to run out the clock and running the ball a lot more than they were passing. So I'm not saying I'm not taking anything away from Pavia and not saying that his numbers aren't really impressive, but you do have to kind of pull back the layers there a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean there's also just the element of the eye test, the Heisman moments that everybody always looks for, and just you can stack up the number of Heisman moments that Fernando has had throughout the season, and I mean certainly he added to that in the Ohio State game, both with the back shoulder throw, the touchdown to Elijah Surratt. I mean, also just I mean coming back onto the field after going down big at the beginning of the game. I mean, that was kind of okay. This guy's got the toughness aspect, and really, I mean, drilling the long shot to Charlie Becker at the end of the game. I mean, obviously Ohio State got the ball back. It didn't clinch the game. He wasn't out there kneeling it out, but I mean, to really put Indiana in position where they were about to win the game. That long shot to Charlie Becker was it. But I mean, you look at the game-winning drive against Penn State. You look at the response that he had at Oregon, the game-winning drive he had at Iowa, and just I mean, it's moments like that always end up defining a Heisman Trophy winner. And I mean, Diego Pavia had a tremendous season, but in their biggest games didn't do enough. And that's it, in my opinion. I don't have a Heisman vote, but if I did, that's kind of what would separate the two for me.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, all four players at the invited had tremendous seasons, but if one of those players led the only undefeated season, 13-0, Big Ten champs, number one in CFP, number one in all the polls, led the country in touchdown passes, like at some point, and I would argue had led his team to two of the three most impressive college football wins of the season. At some point, you just got to say, okay, come on, the numbers can say whatever you want them to say. This guy, to me, again, I'll be very curious to see how the vote goes.
Yeah.
So again, that'll be a fun little conflict for IU fans. That's at 7:00. I guess it's a half hour before IU basketball tips against Kentucky. So that'll be your appetizer for the basketball game. Fun night for IU fans, at least to start. we'll see how the basketball game goes.
It starts at what? The program starts at 7.
That's true.
Does it go an hour?
Yeah, that is true. It may be during the basketball game. I hadn't thought about that. You're right. The program starts at 7, and silly me thinking they'd actually just get to the plot.
Although you know how the Heisman Trophy ceremony goes. I mean, they always just wait until the very end.
Yeah, you're right. As I think about that, I haven't had a lot of reason to watch that through the years. As anyone listening to this might not be surprised, but I have watched it enough to know you're right. It'll probably be closer to 8. That means it will be into the first half of IU versus Kentucky. That means ESPN's going to get a lot of people flipping over. The Heisman ceremonies on ABC. The basketball games on ESPN, so they'll get a lot of people flipping over. I guess they don't really care since Disney owns both networks. But
they should set up some sort of double screen. They set up some sort of double screen option for us.
Yeah, I mean, I know if you're a YouTube TV subscriber, you can do that on your own. So that might be the way to go. So let's talk about, before we get into the basketball game, let's talk about the CFP bracket. It's such an interesting situation here for IU, sitting there watching two of the blue bloods of college football, Alabama and Oklahoma, on is that the Friday night game? I believe it is.
I think
You
so.
can yeah. Teams to me that they played this year, they played a very tight game. Oklahoma actually won in Alabama. Teams that are better defensively than offensively, I think could give Indiana a game just by their ability to keep it low scoring. I'm not really sure I have an opinion yet on who I think would be the more favorable matchup for Indiana, just because I feel like they're very similar teams. I don't know if you have any reaction to that.
I think the more favorable matchup to me, I would think Oklahoma is a little bit more favorable. I think neither of these. I think you're right that both these teams are stronger defensively than offensively. I mean, I just checked total offense. Alabama is, I think. Let me pull it up again. Alabama is 69th in the country in total offense, with 389 yards per game and change. For reference, Ohio State was 26th in the country in total offense. Oklahoma is 90th in the country in total offense. They rank right below Penn State and Maryland, and they're below Illinois as well. So, there's context there for teams that Indiana has played this season as to where these teams stand offensively. I think Oklahoma, in that sense, is the better matchup just because, look, I think when you look at Oklahoma's offense, the thing that would give you a little bit of pause is the one thing that's given Indiana's defense a little bit of hiccup here and there this season is when you faced a quarterback that can run really well, and when you have a team that can kind of really force you to play east to west and take the defensive line out of it. And so John Mateer's ability to run the ball could give them some fits, but I just don't think I trust Oklahoma's offense to do that consistently against a defense as strong as Indiana's, which, and yeah, I mean, both teams have good defenses. It could be low scoring, but I just don't know that I trust Oklahoma's offense to do enough to keep it a game with, Indiana's offense. I think could still put up points in that game. So I think I'd say Oklahoma's a bit more of a favorable matchup than Alabama, but really, I don't think that this is the worst possible draw in terms of potential Rose Bowl opponents for Indiana. I think certainly, I mean, frankly, the team that I was thinking could end up in that spot that could have been trouble for Indiana is not even in the field. I thought Notre Dame, if they ended
Mhm.
up with Notre Dame in that spot, I think that could have gotten a little nervy for Indiana.
Yeah, both because they've got the past experience of losing to them, plus Notre Dame had been playing lights out for 10 weeks in a row. I would agree with that. Do you think the fans in this game, do you think we'll see a sign in the stands from either Oklahoma or Alabama fans that say, "We want Indiana"?
I'm gonna
I think
guess no.
we've seen for like 20 years like these fan bases say, "We want Bama." I want to see a "We want Indiana" sign as the true like completion of the turnaround that we've seen here.
I'm gonna guess no. um, I'm gonna guess no. I mean, the fun angle, if you want to talk the fun angles of this, is that if Alabama won, it would be Kalen DeBoer against Indiana.
Yeah, and it's also funny because we're sitting here talking about Alabama's offense as not super impressive, and like he was a guy that a lot of people thought, man, that's probably the biggest loss of a coordinator that Indiana may have ever experienced. He was the architect behind a really good offense in 2019. And he's not the only person on this staff. I see if I can remember this off the top of my head. Kane Womack is the defensive coordinator. He was defensive coordinator at IU. Nick Sheridan, I don't know if he's quarterbacks coach. He has a role on the staff. He was an offensive coordinator at IU after DeBoer. You got Jason Jones as a defensive backs coach. He was a safeties coach at IU, and you have the strength and conditioning staff of Nick Ballou and others that were the strength staff at IU. So it's almost IU South down there.
Old IU South, a little bit,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I can remember like losing Ballou. I can remember, and he's an actual IU grad. Like people were losing their mind about that one.
Yeah.
Losing DeBoer and Womack were tough. Like, a lot of people thought like they were the real keys behind that success in 2019, and Wombat continued in 2020, which I would say in many ways they were very integral to that little run of success there. So it's just very funny to see things kind of come potentially full circle there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then on the to look way too far ahead on the other bottom of this bracket, I believe we're going to get a Texas Tech Oregon matchup. Even though I'll probably find myself rooting for James Madison, but um, that's going to be a fun one. That feels like elite offense versus elite defense. I think that just as a fan, that for me will be a fun one to watch. As a potential opponent for Indiana down the road.
Yeah, well, I mean, Oregon's defense
Mm-hmm.
actually has given up fewer yards per game. Oregon is number 4 in total defense on the season. Texas Tech is number 5. So I mean, Oregon is right there with Texas Tech defensively. I mean, they're a difference of about 3 yards per game, and obviously, at that point, you could start to line up the schedules and see who everybody played and all of that. But I mean, that to me would be a really interesting game, no doubt. I mean, that's too. I mean, I think there's a lot of people when they've been talking about this CFP that are saying that it's just such a clear top 4 in the country to this point. I mean, I feel like I would probably include Oregon in there and say that to me, it's a top 5 that feel like they've separated themselves from everybody else in the nation at this point.
Yeah, and to that point, kind of related. Like I thought it was like the ultimate compliment to Indiana to not only put them number 1, but to keep Ohio State number 2. It's like, okay, your only loss was to Indiana. You must be pretty good. Like,
Yeah.
and kind of the same, like you're saying, like everybody thinks Oregon is dangerous and really good, and I could see them winning this whole thing if Moore gets hot.
Yeah, it
And
felt like a bit of a statement to me by the committee in terms of just with the whole bracket that they were not punished. It seemed like just they maybe were not trying to punish people for losing in conference championship games, because to me it feels like they had almost predetermined, as long as it's not an absolute blowout, that Big Ten champ is going to be number 1, Big Ten runner up is going to be number 2. And I think based on the way things played out, and it's really seeing Alabama not drop after playing a pretty poor game against Georgia, I think tells me that that's kind of the way they were approaching it, not dropping people out of the bracket because they lost in their conference championship game. You could look at BYU kind of being in between Notre Dame and Miami in the rankings before in the penultimate rankings. You could look at that. But the thing is, BYU was not in the bracket at that point anyway. So BYU,
right,
was either going to jump in as the Big 12 champ or not be in the bracket anyway. And at that point, I guess it didn't make a difference, in terms of being in the playoff versus not being in the playoff. They ended up being the second team out, and that also might just have to do with the way the ACC played out and the way just everything, the way other things kind of went in
right,
terms of the bracket makeup. But yeah, I think Oregon for sure, being number 5, the top team without a bye is. I mean, that is, and you're right, Ohio State at number 2, even if it was all predetermined with the conference championship game stuff. I mean, that is a sign of respect to Indiana that, hey, your only loss this season was to the number 1 team in the country, the Indiana Hoosiers. That, you beat everybody else besides the number 1 team. That's still a pretty good resume.
right, right. Okay, so Indiana, because of this bracket right here, has basically we're into it now, but 3.5 weeks roughly before their next game. I had just happened to be listening to Nick Saban. I forget where he was, what venue he was speaking on, but he was talking about lessons learned from these kind of layoffs. Like I think early in his career, maybe going back to his Michigan State or LSU days, like he said, like they like practiced really hard like through the whole break, and they kept getting beat. And he said by the time he got to Alabama, they completely did a 360 on that, or a 180 on that, and really did what I think Kurt Cinetti is saying that they're going to do, like treating these first 2 weeks as almost like bye weeks, where they'll still practice, they'll still do weights, and they'll still kind of stay sharp, but they're not going to put a lot of practice snaps on these guys' legs or anything like that. It's all going to be pretty light. Just kind of trying to maintain a level of readiness without going crazy. And, obviously, as Saban was saying that, he's saying that realization hit at the time when Kurt Cinetti was on his staff at Alabama and playing in massive situations just like this. At that time, Alabama, that Kurt Cinetti was on Alabama's or Nick Saban's first Alabama staff the first 3 years, and they went from a really rough first season to a national championship. Was it the second, I think? And just really, you could tell that it all came together. And so Signetti having that foundation. Now he did say this week that he's going to do things a little bit different. He's got his own way of thinking about it because Indiana's depth isn't what Alabama's is. So I think he's going to go even lighter than where Saban ended up. But I think he's the point of all that rambling is I think he's got a really solid baseline understanding of what these next 3.5 weeks should look like.
Yeah, I mean, and it's also worth remembering, amongst all that, I mean, for a lot of those years that Saban talked about that strategy, he knew who he was going to be playing in 3.5 weeks, and Indiana doesn't know that right now.
Right.
I'm sure the coaching staff is diving a bit into both of those teams, and I mean, you got to take advantage of the time you have, but I mean, they're only going to have uh, about a week and a half, maybe a little more than a week and a half of, okay, we know who we're playing now. We are playing Alabama or we are playing Oklahoma in the Rose Bowl. And, they'll have a little over a week and a half of time to prepare for that. And really, it's probably just a little over a week, maybe 8 days or so that they have before they even go out there. And you're in California for that. So, I feel like when you're looking at a big layoff like this, you break it down. It's easier when you break it down into, smaller segments. You have a week and a half before you know who you're going to play. Now we know who we're going to play, and we have, this period, and then we go out to California and we have this period. And, it helps to maybe not be staring down the barrel of 3.5 weeks without a game to kind of break it down like that.
Yeah, nah, good point. Um, it is interesting. I wanted to mention this. I wish I could remember who I heard say it so I could give them credit. But just thinking about like what Indiana has in front of them now, 13-0 outright Big Ten champs, up until uh, you know 10, 15 years ago. Right now, as you kind of suggested there, that they already know who they're playing. It would basically be a one game, like winner takes all national championship. Now they've got this gauntlet that we're looking at here where every game's going to be just a physical war. Um, I don't know that I really have any point to that other than like it's almost like as awesome in my opinion as the CFP is. It's like, man, can we just go back to the old way for 1 year?
Just make it a little easier on yourself.
Yeah. Although it'll be good for business, I can tell you that.
Yeah. Have you seen I know at least DraftKings has betting lines available for the hypothetical games, like for the quarterfinals. Have you seen those lines?
No, what do you got?
Well, I want you to guess first what you think the line would be between Indiana, Oklahoma, and then Indiana, Alabama.
Well, I can't imagine the lines for each of those hypotheticals being much different. I think I'd probably say Indiana would be around -3 or -4 in both of them.
You're not giving Indiana enough credit once again.
I've been guilty of that all year, so I'm not surprised.
So DraftKings has Indiana -7 against Alabama, and they have Indiana -9.5 against Oklahoma.
Okay. So that must mean Oklahoma's an underdog to Alabama, even
Well,
though they beat them in Tuscaloosa this year. Um, I guess I'm not
Yeah,
given the odds.
that's pretty close. Alabama's a 1.5 point favorite in Norman, so that's pretty close in terms of
Yeah,
a line there. But
yeah,
also that's both, Alabama being a favorite there, but also just how do they stack up against Indiana,
right. Yeah, guess
which
I'm not giving the
backs
odds
up
makers enough credit to do that
yeah
analysis, but that's their
back.
business.
I mean that backs up my answer to your question before that I think Oklahoma would be a slightly more favorable matchup for Indiana.
Mhm, mhm. Yep. Um, all right. Well, anything else about football before we turn the page here?
No, I think I feel like we've covered our bases.
So it feels strange to me, being in this business for a while and being around IU for a lot longer than that to spend where we at here 55 minutes talking about football and kind of just throwing in at the end an IU Kentucky game that we've been. I bet if you went back on the Daily Hoosier since it's been in existence. I bet I or somebody has written an article about the return of the Kentucky series. Like, oh, John Calipari said this, Mike Woodson said this, Archie Miller said this. I bet there's probably 20 articles talking about the return of the series. That hasn't happened. A regular season game hasn't happened in 14 years since the Watt shot. Which are we on the anniversary of that game? We're right
It
around
was
it because I
yesterday.
keep seeing. Okay, I was gonna say I kept seeing social media stuff about it. I don't repost it because I'm kind of tired of it, but in any event, um, it's just funny. It's just another kind of sign of the times that where we're at. But this game also doesn't look. Talking Indiana Kentucky basketball now, it doesn't look like what any of us thought it was going to be even a couple of weeks ago. Both these teams were ranked. Kentucky, I think, started the season top 10. Indiana had moved up into the top 20, but neither team. And I can pull up the Ken Palm stats here for people watching on YouTube. Neither team has really lived up to well, I guess that's not really fair to say about Indiana. They probably lived up to expectations. I think the Minnesota game is just kind of leaving a little bit of a taint in the minds of fans because it's been so recent. But Kentucky certainly at 6-4 has not at all been what anybody expected of this team. It's a little bit of an all-star team. It's there's been talk of them having like a $20 million budget to put this team together. And as you look at their resume, what has really haunted them to this point, and they're going to have a game where it all comes together, is that 3-point percentage. They're 32.9% from three, 195th in the country, and like I said, they're going to have a game where they shoot the three ball really well, and Indiana fans just got to hope it's not on Saturday night.
Yeah, and Indiana fans also have to hope that if Saturday night is the night that Kentucky's three ball comes alive, that Indiana's own three balls are going down and that they can keep pace with a high scoring team like that. And we saw them do that. I mean, they kind of ran away with it against Kansas State, but we saw them do that against a Power Four team in Kansas State. We saw them do that against Marquette. But I mean, Kentucky's on another level. And certainly, I mean, you talk about the Minnesota game and just how rough that went pretty much all around for Indiana. And I mean, the Louisville game, which we haven't even mentioned, was on the same day as the Big Ten championship football game. I mean, Indiana went down 16-0 in that game and played Louisville I think Indiana outscored Louisville the rest of the way after that. And you just can't do that against, I mean, Louisville's, a level above Kentucky. I mean, I think they're, what are they ranked now? I don't know exactly where they're ranked right now, but Louisville's a really good team and better than Kentucky. But
They blew out Kentucky. Yeah, they blew out
right.
Kentucky a few weeks ago.
Yeah, well, that game, Louisville won that game. That was 96-88, and that's one of those where the final score doesn't really reflect the way that game went.
Right.
I mean, Kentucky's other four losses, they've all been to good teams, to be fair to Kentucky.
Right.
I mean, they lost big to Michigan State. They lost a close one against North Carolina, and they got destroyed by Gonzaga. So, and they've all lost. Those are all good teams that they've lost to. They've largely blown out the teams that they're supposed to be blowing out. at this stage of the season. And yeah, it's a big test, I think, for really both sides, which maybe you didn't expect going into this game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it feels like a game Kentucky needs more than Indiana. Like I'm going down there Saturday night. I would love to see the fans' reaction late in the second half if it starts getting away from Kentucky, because they were already booing Mark Pope off the court, or maybe not just him specifically, but they were very vocal booing. I believe that Gonzaga game was in Nashville, so it was largely a home game for Kentucky, and it got really ugly. Probably in part because Gonzaga had just lost to Michigan by 40 and then turned around and had a 40-point lead on Kentucky. Still trying to wrap my head around that. Michigan is rightfully the number one team in the country right now. Indiana will see them down the road. But really, I had never seen, or I shouldn't say never, but not in a very long time, seen Kentucky look so bad as they did against Gonzaga. And it looked a little bit like watching some of the recent vintage Indiana teams where they just kept bricking three after three after three.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean Kentucky, they'll have, following this week's game, they'll have one more real opportunity in non-conference. They have a game against St. John's a week from Saturday, and so this isn't necessarily their last chance at a good win in non-conference, but I mean I think Kentucky is going to feel like they need to get at least one of two, if not both, against Indiana and St. John's, because I mean the SEC is always really tough, and Kentucky is going to be going in there a leg down with the non-conference schedule that they've had. So they're a really talented team. They haven't necessarily showed it every night to this point, but like you say, I think Indiana needs to go in and play its game and do what they're capable of doing. But there's also that little level, like you said, they got to hope that this isn't the night that things start to really come together for Kentucky.
Yeah. Uh, when I've watched Kentucky, and I watched the Michigan State game too, so I've probably seen the worst of them. But what stood out to me, and the stat profile kind of backs it up, is I saw a lot of individuals on the team. I didn't see a lot of team basketball. I saw a lot of hero ball, and that stat there, their free throw rate, free throw attempts divided by field goal attempts, is 305th in the country. It means they're not getting to the line. It just means they're settling for shots. They're not running good offense and putting the defense in any kind of bind. And that's kind of what I've seen. So, and I think Mark Pope, going back to his BYU days, he's thought of as a really good offensive coach. So I suspect they will get this figured out if he's got the right kind of guys that are going to buy into what he's trying to do. From an Indiana standpoint, you think about the Minnesota and Louisville games. To me, what really stood out is that they let opposing defenses really get into them on the perimeter. They let opposing defenses take away Lamar Wilkerson and Tucker DeVries and just make everything they were trying to do offensively really challenging. Like you said, especially in the first 6 minutes against Louisville, and really that entire Minnesota game. I want to call that Minnesota game an anomaly, but I don't think we have enough data one way or another to be sure. Like, I thought you asked DeVries a good question today about how much of that was just the first road game. Funny thing about that was, if you, at least at the first half of the Minnesota game, there wasn't anybody there, and probably half of the people there were IU fans eager to be there. It did end up getting a little bit loud at the end, but nothing like what they're going to see on Saturday night. So I just feel like this is a game with just a lot of question marks for both teams.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, Indiana had a. I mean, we again haven't mentioned what they did just a couple nights ago. And Penn State is maybe the worst team in the Big Ten this year. So and they certainly looked at against Indiana. So again, you can only take so much away from that in terms of big picture takeaways about this team, or you can only point to so much that happened that night and say, oh, this is why they're going to do well against Kentucky or why they're going to struggle against Kentucky. But certainly, I mean, to have a game where you win 113-72 and where you have you hit 17 threes as a team, you have Lamar Wilkerson set the IU 3-point record and the Assembly Hall scoring record with 44 points. I mean, I mean, it helps confidence certainly. I mean, you hear it so much that just good shooters just need to see some of those shots go down just to be able to get momentum going. And that doesn't mean that they're going to stop shooting when they aren't going down, but it's just for a momentum thing. Just to see your first couple shots go down is just so big. And so, I mean, really for Indiana, maybe that puts some added emphasis and importance just on the first few minutes of the game, both to not let Kentucky kind of be the aggressor and be, out tough you at the beginning of the game and establish themselves right away the way Louisville did, number one. But number two, just to, if Lamar Wilkerson or Tucker DeVries and Indiana shooters can see those first few shots go down versus seeing them clank out, it's just such a big difference for the rest of the game in terms of their confidence level in their shot. And I mean, the offense's ability to kind of flow around that.
Yeah, and it's a great point about the start of the game, because that was a trend that went all the way back to Puerto Rico. Their games out there or down there, they started really bad against the Serbian national team, or was it Serbian national, but the Serbian pro team, and the Baylor exhibition. They started really poorly. So and I think it got to the point where we were even asking DeVries questions about, how do you get off to a better start in these games? So you'd like to think that Louisville was kind of an eye opener for them. It's like, okay, we know how Kentucky's going to try to start this game, especially at home, especially because they know they need to play better. So they should go into that game knowing fully well that how that game's going to start. So we'll see what they can do. You mentioned Lamar Wilkerson. He's to me, he's going to be the most interesting person to watch in this game. He's going to be public enemy number one down there. If people remember, he came down to a recruiting battle between Indiana and Kentucky out of the transfer portal in the spring. I think Mark Pope took him to a horse track and tried to, there was all kinds of little twists and angles in that recruitment. But Kentucky fans are not used to Indiana beating them in a high stakes recruitment. So from the first time they see him come out of the tunnel, when his name's announced, and every time he touches the ball, I expect he's going to have the full hatred of Big Blue Nation directed at his way. And it's kind of interesting that he's coming off a career game. Like, how is that going to help him confidence wise? It seems like it should, but it's really going to test him is the bottom line, because he's never in his career seen anything like what he's going to see Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. He probably is going to be public enemy number one, both in turn, just because he's shooting the ball the way that he's been shooting the ball, and because he chose Indiana over Kentucky. And that does make you public enemy number one down in Lexington. So it is a big test just in terms of handling a really hostile road environment. And I would expect Kentucky to be a notch or two above what they experienced with that in Minneapolis. So, I mean, you're not really going to know until those first few minutes when they step out on the floor and they start playing how it's going to go.
Yep. So this is the first of 4 in the latest contract. Hopefully it's the first of a perpetual series now between these guys. I think it's good for the game. I'd like to see, I think it's, if people don't know, it's set up where it's Lexington, then Indianapolis, then Lexington, then Bloomington. I think that's what had to happen to get Calipari to agree to it. Hopefully Pope and DeVries will agree to do something a little bit more equitable. I mean, I guess the Indianapolis game next year, Indiana controls the ticketing, but it's probably going to be hard to make that feel like a true home game. So in any event, it is what it is. And hopefully the larger thing is that this series in whatever form continues on from here on out, because I just think it's good for everything. College basketball needs more games like this. And, cooler heads did prevail to get this done. So credit to everybody that got this done. So we will obviously have full coverage of this game. We will obviously have full coverage of the Heisman Trophy on Saturday evening, and we will revisit both of them next week when we reconvene on the East 17th Street podcast. But until then, He is Seth Tow. I am Mike Schumann for the Daily Hoosier. We'll catch you all next time.